Picture this. It is 4 in the morning. A family is asleep in a house in a quiet suburb. Nice neighborhood, 2-car garage, the kind of street where everybody waves at each other. And at exactly 4 in the morning, a tow truck pulls up silently, hooks up the SUV in the driveway, and disappears into the dark before the sun even thinks about coming up. The family earns $110,000 a year. They have never missed a single payment, not one, and they still woke up without a car. My name is Jordan, and once you understand how the auto lending system actually works, that story stops being a nightmare and starts being a math problem, one that millions of people are already losing. Here is what nobody explains when you were sitting in that dealership chair, excited about that new smell and those clean floor mats. The moment you drove that car off the lot, something happened to the value that the salesman definitely did not put on the whiteboard. The average new car loses somewhere between 15 and 20% of its value within the first year. Not over 5 years, not gradually over a decade. The first year. The year you are still excited about the car. The year you are still cleaning the inside. While you're out here buying air fresheners that match your interior, the bank's asset is already depreciating faster than your enthusiasm. You paid 12 months of car notes, thousands of dollars, and your loan balance barely moved. Because in the early months of a long-term loan, almost every dollar you send goes toward interest, not principal. That's not an accident. That is the design. Now here's where it gets interesting, because the car industry noticed something around 2022 and 2023. People were stretched thin. Inflation was eating paychecks, but people still needed cars. So how do you sell a $45,000 vehicle to someone whose budget says $450 a month? You stretch the loan. You take what used to be a standard 48 or 60-month agreement and you pull it like taffy until it becomes 72 months, then 84 months. Some lenders started offering 96-month loans. That's 8 years. 8 years of car payments. Do you understand what 8 years means? 8 years ago, there were people making payments on cars they no longer have, relationships they no longer have, jobs they no longer have, and if they signed a 96-month loan back then, they might still be paying on a car that's sitting in someone else's driveway. But here's the quiet part nobody says out loud. A longer loan does not lower the cost of the car. It lowers the monthly payment number so the car feels affordable, while the total cost quietly grows. On an 84-month loan at a typical interest rate, you can easily pay $6,000 to $10,000 more over the life of the loan than you would have on a 48-month loan. Same car, thousands more dollars, just stretched out thin enough that you don't feel the weight of it until it's too late.
And this is where the situation starts getting genuinely strange. Because this system ran headfirst into a wall starting in 2023 and accelerating into 2025 and 2026. During the pandemic years, used car prices went insane. Supply chain problems, inventory shortages. Dealers were marking up cars 20% above sticker price, and people were paying it because they had no choice. Those buyers financed those inflated prices on long-term loans. Then the market corrected. Car values started dropping back toward normal, but the loan balances from those inflated purchases did not drop with them. The debt stayed exactly where it was, while the asset underneath it lost value fast. Economists call this being underwater. The casual version is realizing you owe $18,000 on something a dealer will offer you $11,000 for. And right now, depending on which data you look at, somewhere between a quarter and a third of all financed vehicles in America are underwater. That is not a fringe problem. That is millions of driveways. Here is where it becomes a trap and not just a bad trade. Imagine you are $6,000 underwater on your current car. The car is worth $30,000 and you owe $36,000. Then the transmission starts going. The repair estimate comes back at $4,000. Now you are facing a decision that has no good exit. You cannot sell the car because you would walk away owing $6,000 out of pocket just to get rid of it. You cannot trade it in without the dealer rolling that negative equity into your next loan, which means you start the next car already $6,000 in the hole before the odometer moves 1 mile. And you cannot just absorb a $4,000 repair when you're already stretched thin from the payment itself. You are trapped, not by the car, by the math. And this is the part that reframes the entire picture. Because here's what I need you to understand, and I want you to actually sit with this for a second before moving on. The bank does not lose money when you are underwater. The bank already sold your debt. I'll say that again because it sounds like something you mishear and walk past. The bank already sold your debt. When a lender writes an auto loan, they frequently package that loan together with thousands of other auto loans and sell the entire bundle to investors on Wall Street. These are called asset-backed securities. Your monthly payment, the one you make while hoping your transmission holds together, becomes a revenue stream flowing to institutional investors you will never meet and who have never seen your car. The lender collected origination fees, packaged your obligation, transferred the risk, and moved on to the next customer. What happens to you and that vehicle afterward is largely not their immediate financial problem. Let that reframe everything you just heard.
The trap is not a design flaw. It is the product performing exactly as intended. This means the incentive structure of the entire arrangement is almost perfectly backwards from what most people assume. You assume the bank is rooting for you to be financially stable because stable customers pay their loans, and that is partially true. But the more profitable version of the story is originating as many long-term, high-interest loans as possible, packaging them quickly and selling them upstream. The longer the loan term, the more interest. The more interest, the higher the value of the security being sold. Your 84-month loan is not a favor, it is a product. You are not the customer in that transaction. You are the underlying asset. So what does any of this change practically? First thing it changes is how you think about the monthly payment conversation. The dealer will almost always steer the conversation toward monthly payment because that is the number that makes expensive things feel manageable. $499 a month sounds reasonable until you realize you're agreeing to pay that for 7 years on a vehicle that will be worth significantly less in 3. The question that actually matters is total cost and total loan term. Second thing it changes is how you think about car value timing. And this one is simple enough that it almost feels like it should be taught in school, which is probably exactly why it is not. Buying a vehicle that is 2 to 3 years old instead of brand new transfers that initial depreciation hit to the previous owner. The steepest drop has already happened. You buy into a flatter part of the curve with a smaller loan, a shorter term, and significantly less exposure to the underwater scenario. The car does not care how old it is. The math does. Third thing it changes is how you think about negative equity before it happens. If you're financing a vehicle right now, knowing where your loan balance will be versus projected car value at the 24 and 36-month marks is not paranoid. It's the same logic the bank is using when they price the loan. The difference is they already ran those numbers before you signed anything. The family whose car got towed at 4 in the morning was not irresponsible. They were not reckless. They made a decision that looked perfectly reasonable when they made it. The monthly payment was manageable, the car was real, the loan was approved. Every single party in that transaction smiled and shook hands and signed paperwork. The problem was not the decision. The problem was not understanding what the decision actually meant inside a system that measured success in loan volume and interest yield, not in whether you still had transportation 5 years later. That's the thing about the financial system. It does not hide these mechanics in a locked vault somewhere. They're written in loan agreements and financial disclosures that most people reasonably do not read because nobody explained why any of it mattered. That tow truck is not a punishment. It's just the end of a math problem that started the moment someone decided 7 years was a reasonable amount of time to owe money on something that depreciates every single day it exists. Once you see the math, you can't unsee it. And that's exactly where the advantage starts.